Hello, everybody. My name is Hiro, and my senior project was learning how to fly, also known as getting my private pilot's license, but I'm still working on it, and we'll talk about that later. So, I chose it because I've loved aviation from a very young age. Having family on another continent, I flew very often, and I wanted to see if it would fit in my future and if it was a career choice. And even if I didn't want to pursue becoming a pilot, I wanted to get my private pilot's license anyways. So the main connection to One Planet would be transportation. Although there isn't much on One Planet connections in the curriculum of the private pilot learning course. I did do my own research and learn about kerosene and efficient fuels and electric planes and other things like that. So I started off early on June 23rd. I had my first flight lesson in this Cessna 172 with this flight instructor named Kyle. So the first few flights we did straight and level turns, climbs and descents, ground reference maneuvers, and traffic pattern entries, all in this small Cessna 152, which is one of the smallest training planes out there. You're really just bumping your shoulder and your elbow as you're moving around in the cockpit. I remember the first flight was extremely just overwhelming because there's so much to keep track of with all the everything on the panel, the airspeed indicator and altimeter and looking out, through the window as well. I decided to try a different CFI. CFI stands for Certified Flight Instructor, and I started flying with Dwight. Um, the main thing we started working on was landings and emergency procedures and traffic avoidance. And as you can see in the picture here, um, on the right hand corner, this is a screenshot of our flight just going around and around the airport, practicing landings over and over again. On August 13th, I flew my solo flight, which is a very big step in getting your private pilot's license. Flying solo basically means the instructor signs you off to fly the airplane on your own. Nobody's in the cockpit with you. Nobody's in the plane at all, and you just have the plane to yourself, and it was an amazing flight. After that, we started doing cross-country flights. Cross-country flights are flights that are longer than 50 nautical miles, and we went to Sacramento International a couple times, but we were interrupted by smoke and haze, and we had issues with an ADS-B too. ADS-B is basically just it's a thing in the aircraft that lets other aircraft and air traffic control know where you are. So, and the picture in the left-hand corner is just like a flight log. Flying at night was definitely one of the highlights. The sun is a major driver of all weather on Earth, and without it, the air is really stable, and obviously it's cool. And it's at night, so there's not a lot of traffic, and you basically have the whole airport to yourself, and it was very fun. And flying down to Sacramento is always fun as well. So with the flying part, there's also obviously stuff you have to learn when you're not flying on the ground. And the school I decided to do my training with closed their ground school due to COVID. And so I didn't really have structure in the beginning. And so it was very challenging. But later on, I got Sporties, which is a program which helps people like me doing kind of the independent ground school course, and that really was helpful. Um, I had quite a few struggles, as you can see, finding motivation and finding time to focus and study, and only learning bits and pieces was also an issue because my instructor would tell me like, "Oh, you need to go learn this," and then I'd go home and I just learn a little bit about that, or I just read like a couple pages on it, and I wouldn't really take good notes or absorb it very well. So I only learned little pieces here and there. And my first landings were just absolute disasters. I landed on the nose wheel instead of the back two wheels, and I still have issues with short field landings. Short field landings are basically landings where you land on a short runway or a simulated short runway. You only have 200 feet to land, which is really not a lot, so it's really hard. I also had struggles with navlogs. Navlogs are basically your flight plan going on your cross countries, so longer flights, and just the time and the speed of the aircraft and the weight and balance and all that stuff. Those calculations were pretty difficult for me, and of course, out of my control. But heat and the haze and the smoke was really frustrating at times because we had to cancel flights sometimes. So I don't have my private pilot certificate yet, but I did complete my ground portion, as you can see here. Um, I'm studying for my knowledge test, which is basically the airplane version of the test you take at the DMV for your car license. And then after that, I'm going to do solo cross countries, which are 50 nautical mile flights on my own. And then after that, I will prep for my check ride, which is basically the airplane version of uh, a test flight where an examiner sits with you and asks you to uh, show your skills. So the successes I had, my first solo was incredibly fun, and it was just amazing. Definitely finishing ground school, the night flights were amazing, and making new friends. I had the opportunity to fly at the Hayward Air Rally, which is basically an event where you fly all around California, and there are a bunch of checkpoints, and whoever gets the best time to a certain location wins. And I got to fly in a Centurion, Cessna 210, which is a complex and also a high performance aircraft, which just means it has much more horsepower than I'm used to, and it has retractable landing gears, and yeah. Also, flying to Sacramento was really fun. I got to do that a couple times actually, Sacramento International, and buttering in Sacramento. Buttering just means landing very smoothly. So my project is definitely not easy at all. Um, Getting your private pilot's license, I don't think, is anything like getting your driver's license or any other tests like that. And yeah, but it's incredibly rewarding because there's nothing like just being in the sky and looking down, and it's just a whole different world and perspective you have of where we live. I learned many lessons. I didn't really take good notes in the beginning, and I should have asked way more questions and been way more involved. Um, I should have, had a better structure and uh, a plan for everything, but that's the lesson I learned. So big thank you to my CFI, Dwight. I don't think he's here right now, but thank you to Dwight and everyone at North Coast Air, Rob, Emily, Kyle, Art, and Aaron. And thank you to Ken for letting me fly in his 210, and Jim for letting me backseat in his 180 twice. And of course, big thank you to my parents for supporting me, financially and emotionally. And big shout out to Ben for studying with me. He's a friend who's also getting his license down in Hayward. And Daniel Sam, he's also a CFI, but he goes to Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University and a good friend. And he helped me get through some ground stuff. And Chris for being my airport buddy. And Miss Fitzgibbon for helping me stay on track and get through this. Does anybody have any questions? Oh, no, I see them. How long was your first solo at Nautical Miles in Time? My first solo, it was just 3 times around the airport, just on the pattern. So basically just staying really close to the airport. I just did 3 touch and goes. Were you ever afraid as you situations in flight? My first flight was kind of scary just because I'd never really flown in such a small aircraft, and they're all really old planes, and there's a lot that I thought could go wrong, but it's really one of the safest things. So, but I did have one situation on the Hayward Air Rally actually. We were down near Bakersfield, and we were flying through. There's a TFR, which is a terminal flight restriction, and we're not allowed to fly through it, but there was a TFR for a fire, and we kind of got through it, but it was kind of scary because we couldn't see, like 500 feet in front of us. So that was a little scary, but it was all right. Is it easier stepwise to get a commercial license once you have your private one? If I want to get my commercial, I need to first, or it doesn't actually matter, but one of the steps is for me to get my instrument, which allows me to fly in bad weather, and helps my my navigation as well. So I'd say probably the commercial might be just easier just because you have more experience, but they're all pretty hard. So favorite time of day to fly, definitely the night, just because the air is very stable. What car was in the last photo? A BMW. How many times did you go before you did your solo? I flew for 2 months, and I think I had about 25 hours, probably like 50, 60 landings. People usually solo between 15 and 30 hours, I think, so I was kind of on the slower end, but yeah. My favorite flight, that's a pretty hard question. I've had a lot of favorite flights, but I'd probably say flying at night into Sacramento International. The air is just very stable, and you can see all the lights, and pandemic, and it's at night, so there wasn't a lot of other planes flying, so it was the controller at SAC International was kind of bored and talked to us. And then on the way back, we got to see some tankers flying into Travis Air Force Base. So that was a really fun flight. Next presenting, we have Katrina Yardley.